So I think everyone heard from the beginning, we're here to talk about how we support women entrepreneurs and so forth. We started out with the first question: what advice would you give future generations of women and who want to be entrepreneurs? Roxas answered the question first, and I was following up with both Jennifer and Anna to see if they would like to also respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anna, would you like to go?
Sure, thank you. And let's start with the most important question when it comes to female entrepreneurs, and that's aiming higher. That's aiming not only for state funding, aim for...
Megan, can you mute?
Can you hear me? Should I continue? Okay, so my number one is aim higher, both in the way that you want to build your funding journey and your vision for the company. Aim also higher of recruiting talent that is creating good energy around you. Have mentors, and also be clear about the business value. Talk about the business value and don't apologize for it. This is my experience, since the AI Sustainability Center is partly a research hub. It's a consultancy with scalable tech tools to scan and detect and measure ethical pitfalls and risks such as discrimination and gender inequality in AI applications. And we're also creating a movement for this purpose. My challenge has been, I'm comfortable in the area of speaking of on the topic and the challenges and how we're going to solve it. I have been affiliated to the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. I've published articles in Nature Communication. I've done a lot of thorough work, but yet my threshold is to focus on the business value and don't be ashamed of going there directly when it comes to your strategy. And business strategy is not something that you should be embarrassed for. That's my own experience, that aim higher. And also what I want to say is that when it comes to business value, diversity of mind and having more females coding is going to be crucial if we're not going to end up in reputational or legal breaches. That is, that if you code and if you apply AI and don't consider the social and legal implications, you will find yourself in trouble. So diversity in mind is crucial here.
Yes, thank you for sharing. I think you made a good point where you said, don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to show, what your plans are. I think that's a very important tool, not to sit and let others speak for you. Yeah, thank you. Jennifer, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I found in founding my company maybe 14 years ago that I really lacked that more senior than me experienced female founder cohort as mentors for me. I didn't even know where to look. And therefore I hired who was right in front of me, which ended up meaning, I had male leaders alongside me building the company. But what I really wished for all along was that I had a stronger community. So I have been certified as woman-owned with WeBank, which is a US-based, mainly US-based certification body, and it's the biggest one in the country. And I'm also LGBT owned and certified as well, similar thing. So it sort of lives in the realm of supplier diversity. But what I specifically sought through that certification was that community, right? Because I didn't know what I didn't know. And there were so many things that can hurt you when you are trying to make decisions for the first time. If you're not a serial entrepreneur, even if you are, having, people sitting alongside you, reviewing things, helping you make decisions, helping you have the tough conversations, when you haven't kind of traveled that road before, a lot you can destroy everything you've invested. And so I've made some extremely costly. CEO kind of pulled me back from the brink and said, do this, don't do that, you know. And that was a voice and of expertise by a woman specifically that I really needed, like all the way along. So we have to fight to get these networks. We have to line them up. We have to invest in them. Don't wait until you're in a crisis to do that. Have that community, be involving that community in your business as much as you possibly can, because I think when we don't have role models to follow, we are at a risk that's quite different than other identities. And I want all of us to succeed. So be smart about this, and really be extremely proactive in investing in that, because it's incredibly important.
Yes, absolutely. And I just wanted to build off of this. Mentors, it's so important to have these mentors. And, especially as females, mentors, no matter whether they're male or female, but having them there to kind of guide you along, I think is very important. I know for myself, I've had several mentors as I've, climbed this ladder. And because you learn, you can take, your mistakes, and there's someone there to help you. Anna, you had a point.
Yes, I think there is some difference between in the entrepreneur field in the approach to risk. So if you are a male and have your traditional male network, you know that if you fail, you will get covered. I mean, the cushions are there to lift you up again. But even though we have female networks, we have social events, and we get to know each other really tight and like sisters. We need to stand up for each other and be a cushion so that we can take risk in another way. Because risk is crucial when you're an entrepreneur. And if you surround you both mentally, but also in an environment when you don't have the perspective that your failure means that you're out. So I'm speculating, based on my experience, the shame of failure is more inherited in female founders than it is in male founders. So when we create these networks, we help each other, and we're not ashamed of doing business together. That's what men has done for the past, or in the beginning of business life. And we should not be afraid to mix social friendship with business.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Ramses, do you have anything to add? One point that Anna made was, men often have this cushion, whereas females don't. What are your thoughts on that?
Oops, we seem to have lost him.
We might have lost him.
Okay. Can I make a comment in the meantime, Megan, to your wonderful question? Oh, there he is.
Yeah, don't try to steal, Jennifer. Come on. No, It was ladies first. Come on.
I was just going to say, Anna, what you just said, so important. We don't have the flexibility. Well, we perceive we don't have the flexibility to fail, but I think it's also real, that we're really taking an undue amount of risk in forging these new paths, and there isn't as much tolerance for failing forward and that growth mindset, both in ourselves, I think psychologically, in the way that we're socialized. We struggle with perfectionism, I think, and that's very gendered. But also, the cushion you refer to that's under certain people and not under others is huge. That difference is so big, and we have to have our eyes wide open to that. And I wonder, Rasmus, like allies like you are that cushion. You provide, I think, something incredibly important. and also probably push your colleagues to think bigger about what's possible too, and to get more take the calculated risks that might make us feel uncomfortable, but that we need to be taking because we're capable of so much more than we believe.
I certainly think that most women are capable of more than they dare to say out loud. I went last year for International Women's Day. I went to speak at Google's headquarters here in Copenhagen about the work that I've done to promote. That was to get more women in tech, which I'm also working on. And what I've learned from Google's research, so this is not my ramblings or my research, it's Google's research, is that a lot of women tend, if they see a job ad and they fulfill 80% of it, they don't seek the job. But if a man sees a job and he fulfills 20% of it, he will seek it, because it's like, yeah, I can do that, or I can learn the rest, I'll give it a shot. And so there's that thing. And they have this whole I am remarkable thing. I don't know if you heard of it, but Google is doing a lot with something called I am remarkable, which is essentially just asking women to, if you do something that's good, talk about it, say it. That is something that women can work on. But there are still some frontiers, the way I see it. I'm pretty involved in the Copenhagen startup scene, and all the boardrooms are filled with men, and all the people with the money are maybe 90% men. So it's tough for female founders to come into a room and to sit there, and it's not easy yet as a female founder. So I can only concur with Anna on, build networks, be better at building networks, ask, hey, how can you help me? Often I find I've worked a lot with PR, and often I see tremendous stories, fantastic stories. And it's like, why don't you tell this story? And it's like, well, it's not really anything, is it? So that's something that I guess we have to work on. So I saw you wanted to make a comment, Anna.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying is extremely important, but we should also look at the large recruitment firms using AI, recommending skills that an algorithm has picked out based on historical norms. So even though you take out the gender feature, you will have a pattern that correlates with historical male-dominated skills like execute on CV. So that we have to go from black boxes to a glass box organization to really get this right from the beginning. So the Sustainability Center is working with the Swedish Equality Agency, who is scanning the rest of Swedish governments with the aim to scan the rest of the Swedish government's AI applications for gender bias. And that was my first point, and that work is so important, and I think that Sweden has a chance to take the leading role here. We have a history of owning this issue, and we have a way of twisting gender diversity in a way that is on the forefront. But anyway, what I think, again, we should talk about both the business value, but we should talk about productivity. So as a macroeconomist, it is crucial that we enter sectors when there is a high risk, such as AI innovations. In order to get the productivity going, we cannot, and this is also referring to the corona crisis, push money into old dinosaur sectors that will not lead to productivity gains. So risk in this time of history is more important than ever, linked to productivity. And if we see where the economy is getting, there's still a lot of money, interest rates are low, but the government's way of solving with fiscal policy and the combination of fiscal and monetary policy is not optimal for female founders, not aiming for the risk that society and economy needs based on that there's no cushion. The third topic I want to linger around is when you say, Rasmus, that in Norway, for example, I am on the board of a large Norwegian public firm, and the magic, so I'm not referring to that board position, but I'm referring to the Norwegian way of having quotas for gender equal board memberships or boards. And the thing is that I think it's such an excellent idea, because in a board, it doesn't happen with one woman in a board, because then you only have to rely on the norm, which is male. So you have to go from 1 to 2 or from 0 to 2 directly. If you have a woman you can lead against to be secure in your diversity of mind, that's when the magic happens, not with one woman on a board.
Yeah, no, absolutely great points. Thank you. But I want to switch gears a little bit and take another question. To all of you, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced? You know, for you, Ramses, you know, being a male and seeing things happen to, you know, females in the business world, and then to Jennifer and Anna, you know, some of the biggest challenges, you know, starting your companies, you know, making sure that women were supported, making sure that yourselves were supported when you first started. So some of those, if you could touch upon those, please.
Yeah, I will leave it for you, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. I'll go first. Gosh, so many challenges. I mentioned some before, you know, not having a playbook, not having the right role models. I think, you know, I think Anna brought this up earlier, that bigger version of yourself that you have to somehow really embrace and convey to other people, even as you're kind of growing into it yourself. You might have a big idea, but believing in that and then going out and selling it and then building a team to literally develop and deliver it. And you're doing all of this at once. So I found there weren't a lot of good resources for me to really learn even how this is done. This is not something taught in MBAs, for example. And then particularly, it's not taught what you're going to be up against from a bias perspective. And for me now, I'm a keynoter and an author, and I'm still fighting against bias, I think, around like, what do you pay a keynote? Who ascends to certain points on the bestseller list? You know, who is paid what and recognized in a certain way and thought of in a certain way. And I think that's, again, it never ends. Like every echelon you achieve, you feel almost like you're cracking through like multiple ceilings as you go. And then, you know, I want to just bring up, I'm a white identified woman. I'm also LGBTQ, but I'm cisgender, I'm white. So there's some elements that speed me along my way and make it easier for me, that I know for those of you who are listening who are much more intersectional than I am from an identity perspective, there are yet again more biases that we're going to encounter. So we have to be really tough, and it's hard, it's exhausting, and I think it's expensive. So we really need the allyship of champions like Rasmus and other women, for sure, to just like hold us up as we try to do all these things at once, because it is a lot. There is no playbook, and yet we're creating something brand new for the world, which the world needs. Whatever you're building, I can assure you the world needs it, and they need us to build it. You know, they need our lens and our identity to build new products and services for, you know, that rapidly, you know, female dominant world, right? That we're seeing the whole business world sort of change. We're seeing customer changing. We're seeing buying power change, you know, so we are on the ascension. And if we stumble so much because of structural inequities, we'll never get to that point, you know? So it's important we have our eyes wide open, that we plan, that we're strategic, and that we take care of ourselves most of all.
May I?
Yes.
So my challenge has been to trust the authenticity in my leadership and my vision. And I think as as Jennifer said, there's no school book. So I've been in academia, I've been in the government, I've been in the startup scene and in large organizations undergoing digital transformation. And there's a role there to play. There's a role model. And I've noticed that in the beginning, there was a lot of more experienced men that wanted to give me advice. And that advice was on a very high level. And I didn't trust my gut feeling here. What I would have wanted is someone to share the sweat of building a company with an entrepreneurial mind. I think not giving high level advice, but getting down to it and kind of creating the landscape or surrounding to use your authenticity and your gut feeling. So it takes, as Jennifer said, there's a bumpy road to learn how to be an entrepreneur. So when I studied at Stockholm School of Economics, I studied with Jacob de Geer, and he was brilliant because there was the first year of actually the startup entrepreneurial faculty at Stockholm School of Economics, and I remember they were viewed as a bit odd, like they would take the shortcut and they would do so. and now it's shifted. So the students going into the entrepreneur faculty or the startup scene road is building more females within the startup scene. So that's good. But it also means that I didn't have a female as many as I would have needed. But it's shifting all the time. And once the entrepreneurs become more mid-sized companies, I mean, there's also correlations with the credit cycle. There's also correlations with the macroeconomy and the fiscal environment we're in. But at this time, if we don't act now, it's a window of opportunity that we have to use. Number one, purpose-driven innovation, sustainability, diversity of mind, with the capital that could, if you look at the stock exchange, the sustainability issues are predominated, a crucial factor. This is our time. We don't know about the credit cycle. It's not correlating with the macroeconomic nor structural or cyclical adjustment, but I have to encourage and shout out that it's a beautiful opportunity. The stars are right positioned right now.
The stars are aligned. Yes, thank you. Rasmus, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would love to, but I feel so simple coming after Anna. But my advice is always very simple, and I say this whenever I get the chance to speak anywhere. It's like what I'm doing that I see is working is that I'm doing something. I'm taking action. So what I can do is not a problem for me to set up an event or speak at a stage or whatever. So what I have done specifically is, well, I have created platforms for female entrepreneurs because I know what it's like to start a company. And when you start a company, what you really want is it's simple things. It's pictures where you look professional. Like, I don't know how many profile photos I have taken. I know at least 25 people on LinkedIn where I have taken the profile photo. Such a simple thing to just help them. Okay, here's some images for you, and we can set up an event, and there can be some you could be a speaker, And then you get your first speaking opportunity as a founder, which many of them have not experienced before, which again is a simple thing really, but it means a lot. And the most important thing is role models, for sure. Every time I do one of these events, I see people bonding and talking together, and matches happen and maybe companies start. But I see these females and these women, if they don't become a role model that night, then maybe they will find a role model, and they learn so much from each other. And as a man doing events, I can certainly say it's super nice doing events for females, but because there is just another energy where people are actually helping. Like I've been in finance, and I've been in crypto and blockchain and all this, and I can certainly tell when you do an event, it's always a bit, in the beginning, people are coming in, they're a bit insecure, but it's absolutely wonderful to do events for females, because they come up and ask, can I help with something? And it's just something that I was completely taken away by, because I started doing events for diversity and inclusion because I had a coworker that couldn't find any role models. Because often when you see IBM and Google and whatever, the big companies, they're so impressive. They've gone to Harvard and Oxford, like some people here, Megan, but they go to these high end universities, and it's really, really difficult for normal people to relate, because they've gone to simple schools in the outskirts of Copenhagen, so they cannot relate, and they cannot say, okay, they can do it because they have these amazing they come from these amazing schools, but I can't do it because I don't have that background. But yeah, you can do it. So it's all about just continually being able to see yourself, and you finding role models, either if it's the same sex, or the same, if it's the same skin color, or if it's the same university education, whatever it is, it's just about finding someone that you can relate to, and you can kind of mirror yourself in. So yeah, I think that's my thought. Anna?
Yeah, and also it is to endure discomfort, and as we were talking about, discomfort for women, I'm generalizing, could be being in taking more risks. So in for me, the mentors in my life has been crucial for being able to endure discomfort for the vision, and to share that discomfort. It's the same if you are in a large organization. When I was at Swedbank, I was pioneering the need for creating tools to measure the positive impacts on digitalization, but also involving in the fintech scene. And being uncomfortable was also when I was affiliated to the Royal Institute of Technology, working with the AI professors and saying that there's a need for transparency here, and there's a need for explainability when there's this AI spring, AI summer. So if you put yourself in a situation where you have a sense of passionate debating, then you're kind of onto something. If you have a thought and an analysis, then you get, oh, maybe not. But if you really get someone who is passionately upset in a negative way, you're onto something. But because now you're challenging old structures, now you're challenging old ways of measuring the economy, or getting your funding for your projects. The need to be uncomfortable in questioning existing structures. It also goes into the ability to do that in the boardroom, but also as an entrepreneur. If you could lead with something that is challenging, you are a minority because you're challenging an old truth. So it becomes easier for you to be a minority as a female. So for example, when I was on the trading floor, I was the only, or we were very few, but in an executive position, I was a minority. I was also a minority of thought. So the female minority with minority of thought, I had a free space there because I was already a minority, so I could go with a larger span of exploring my analysis.
Right.
Does that make sense to you, that you have
Yes.
to be a minority and you have to endure this discomfort, because we are like, we want to be accepted. That's
Right.
our biology.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. You know, there was just some key terms that each of you put out there. You put, you know, challenging norms, Anna, you just mentioned. We talked about role models. We talked about mentors, having strategic plans, being strategic about, you know, as females moving up the ladder and who, you know, we look to for advice. We talked about gaining more support. And then we talked also about having more females on boards. So we have all these ideas, right? And I think the question would come into play, how do we implement them? I think a lot of, you know, young females would say, okay, this is great what you're saying, but how do I do it? So this is a two-part question. One, how do we broaden our network to, you know, encompass more females into it? And all these great things that were discussed, what would your advice be to these younger females trying to climb this ladder? How do they get there? How do they approach people? How do they, you know, make this happen? Jennifer.
Yeah, sure. Wow, I miss the old days of being able to be at conferences and, you know, meet with people, have serendipity happen. I would always make heavy use of, I've moderated lots of panels and done a lot of things like that are industry specific so that I could meet the people that I needed to meet. So I think if you're new to a discussion that's already going on and you're trying to establish your voice in that, we have to be now in the virtual world, be proactive and be helpful. And I know that I hate to even give that advice to women because I feel like innately we're like, oh, you know, I'll take the notes, or, you know, we have these norms that we fall into, and that's not what I mean. But, you know, I had to break into the field I'm in now from nothing. And so I put myself where people that I wanted to know and to meet and who I wanted to be my mentors and who I wanted to be my customers, by the way, I put myself in those places and I paid for it and got myself on planes and offered to be helpful. And like I say, like moderate as gazillion panels. I think our networking needs to be extremely intentional now that we're in the virtual world, because we can't take advantage of some of that. We've got to get really creative, I think, to build relationships. But at the same time, there's more available to us, right? We do have the access of the virtual world. So I tell people to form working groups, you know, with I don't think of perhaps parallel businesses, but same stage, you know, other founders where we have, you know, a group of 10 colleagues who are going after different aspects of the market, hopefully not overlapping, but even so, I know all my competitors very well. And it's really important to have working groups with people who are in the same field as you are as well. So I'm a big fan of what I call co-opetition. You know, how can you construct a discussion forum and a place where you can come together, share learnings, aha moments, cautions, resources, outsourced partners, vendors. I mean, you're making a lot of decisions about these things, talent. Think about those pretty like informal ad hoc consortiums that you can build around yourself And maybe you have one for more senior people that is more of a mentor circle for you, more of a board of directors, if you will, informal board of advisors, whatever you want to call it. And then maybe you have a peer group where you have very different conversations about how it's going, et cetera. So I just would think creatively about creating your own support networks and doing that with a couple different goals in mind. And don't be afraid. I mean, we have to protect our IP. Obviously, we have to protect what's confidential about our businesses, but there's so much you can also talk about that's not proprietary that you really need to know. And you shouldn't try this alone if you don't have to. I mean, there's so much knowledge. Like we said earlier, there's such a scarcity of the right knowledge that you need to do what we're talking about. We have to go to other human beings and get that somehow, because it's not in a book. And certainly if it is in a book, I don't think it's helpfully presented.
Thank you. Anna.
I think we underestimate as females when we're in a sector. I've been in those 4 different blocks with academia, government, startup scene, and large organizations. When we shift from traditional sector, we come with knowledge that is, for us, it's like everyday stuff. But if you shift with that expertise and coming to another environment, that expertise is seen in another light, and it brings so much together. If you just do like this, say that you would be a lawyer or a compliance officer in a large organization, and you would have the way of working like this, and then you would come into or create your own startup. You will find out that your competence applied on a different area is, for you, it's overvalued in your mind, but think about what value you bring just shifting. So for me, going from academia to government, from government to startup, from startup to large organizations, that is creating different eyes on structures, social interactions. So you realize there's no right and wrong. And that's also the no school book for innovation. It's just innovation as such is just seeing in a different light. And I guess you have to raise your money, and you have to build your company, you have to do the HR programs, you have to be thorough, you have to work hard, but you also have to create some kind of write that new light you've created and that new knowledge on the board, so that you understand what competence you really have, just put it in another environment.
Absolutely. Thank you. Our time is actually winding down, so I wanted to touch base again with Rasmus to see if he had any comments before we start wrapping up.
I will do it really quick, and thank you to all of you for taking part here, and to all the 42 people that are watching this Friday, well, this evening here in Denmark. And my advice is so very simple. It is to just reach out to people. Don't be afraid. If you put together a nicely thought email or message on LinkedIn where you come across as not being just a copy-paste message, but you actually have done some research, and you write, for example, to Jennifer Brown, and you say, hey, Jennifer, I've been reading your books and I've been listening to your podcast and XYZ. I know you're really busy, but could you spare 30 minutes with me to give me some advice on XYZ? I promise you, if they read it, they will probably respond in a positive manner, and you can easily get a chat. I've done it with communications directors and CEOs, and because if you reach out and say, hey, I would generally like to learn a little bit more about you and your business, and maybe you can give me some advice. And then I think you can open so many doors, and you can find mentors, and it is, when you ask for investments, you get advice, and if you ask for advice, you get an investment, and that investment can both be monetary, but it can also be in you. That's my message.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And before we go, I want to first thank Anna, Jennifer, and Ramses for participating in this really fruitful discussion. And again, to our audience, I apologize for the technical difficulties because there's so much more we can talk about on these issues because there's just so much to talk about. But in 2 words to all my panelists, what would be 2 words or one sentence that you would say would be a takeaway for all the females watching and wanting to be entrepreneurs, or who are entrepreneurs looking to move to the next steps? Jennifer, we'll start with you.
I'll keep it short. Don't do this alone.
Courage and stubbornness.
And I think my advice would just be trust yourself. Girl, you're awesome.
Wonderful. Yes. 2 thumbs up to our panelists and to our audience for participating. We truly appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.